Hi, I'm Trish Castro, and today I will be discussing online distance learning, expectations versus reality. And while we are on this slide, you can scan the QR code for the journal handout that can accompany you in this webinar, or you can opt to type the link here, bit.ly/ODLEXNLPH. I'll give you a few seconds so you can download, or at least load the page, and you can download this later. Okay, I hope you're done. Let's start. This is basically a summary of first-hand experience because our school already began or started the school year in the last week of July, and most of the schools still will start in October because they're going to follow the DepEd recommendation to open classes on October 5, which is actually the Teachers' Day. So happy Teachers Month actually to all of us, to all educators, and it is really a challenge for us to teach in this kind of setup, in a fully online distance learning setup. Okay? So the school year is about to start, and we have attended various webinars from our sponsored by our favorite publisher, or our alma mater would have organized some webinar as well, or webinars already organized by NLPH, and you have already probably gotten some advice regarding the apps that you can use to engage learners in classes, or other principles or other pedagogical techniques, or even how to make our learning more creative for our students. And so we have everything ready. We already trained in how to use the video conferencing apps, Google Meet or Zoom, and we feel that we are ready. And for those who already started, you probably know what I'm talking about. So we think that we are ready, but yeah. Oh yeah, right? We're so ready. Actually, that's also how I felt. But everything started to crumble down because there were things that we failed to consider when we already started school. We had this very perfect image of how first week of school will look like. And then when we decided to use Seesaw, which is a free app, as our tool, our content delivery tool for our students and parents, we realized there's no calendar. Parents are complaining that how do they know what the tasks are for the day or for the week without any calendar. And then Google Meet, we thought it was already perfect. Our school already uses a Google Suite for Education account, and we thought there won't be any problems, but still we had technical glitches. And we have a lot of complaints or feedback regarding workload, that teachers are not coordinating with each other, that workload is too much for the online distance learning setup. And yes, that's basically our expression when we started the school year. So basically, these are our expectations. In our imagination, we imagined our students so well behaved. The parents are very calm, assisting their child in online distance learning. But in reality, we see these Facebook posts, and for example, this one very recent from Finding Tom. I'm not sure if you saw this, but his wife is a teacher, and he witnessed firsthand what happens behind the scenes. And just to show you, this is reality. Our desk will look like this. We have our flat lace on Instagram, our work from home area. It's so pristine, it's so nice. That's probably before we started becoming stressed. But once we become stressed, this is basically how our desk will also look like. We have a lot of food. Our comfort food is there beside us. Lots of notes, lots of mess basically. And all our gadgets that we shop from Shopee or Lazada are also all over the table. And also, you've probably seen a version also of this picture. Here's one that in reality, this is what really happens at home. The mom is holding a pair of slippers or one of the pair of the slippers and holding it as a threat for her son so that the son will listen to the teacher. Very difficult, right? Because in the classroom, that's our job, making sure that the students are the ones listening to us. And here's a tweet from Gregory Michi, and he said that if my remote classroom had an ad campaign, this would have been it. Mr. Michi's remote classroom. It was way better in his imagination. And just a caution for those who will still start the school year, I think we have to start managing our expectations for the first week. And I'm sure that we all feel that we are not ready, and we will not be ready. That's one thing that I can assure you, and it's a right feeling to feel. And you have to make this real, because really when no one is ready for online distance learning. No one will be ready for online distance learning, not even the school that has already been using technology in class, on campus. We still cannot foresee everything. And as the feedback comes to us, we adjust. That's what we do. And what I'm trying to do here in this webinar is basically that. Share with you already the feedback that were given to us so that we can spare you of the other things. But the root really of all these expectations is our own implicit bias. And what is implicit bias? Why is it important? Recognizing biases is crucial for the true understanding of our students. It will help break down stereotypes and barriers. Because of our implicit bias, we develop these sets of expectations. Unconscious biases are not permanent. In fact, they are malleable, and steps can be taken to limit their impact on our thoughts and behaviors. And these implicit biases need to be changed, and we cannot leave these biases as is. It cannot be status quo. We have to change that status quo. We have to destroy these unconscious implicit biases that we have. For example, we have this implicit bias of ability bias. What does that mean? What kind of bias is it? It is using ourselves as the measure for our students' ability. If I can do it, then my students can do it. Ako nga sa bahay, kaya kong gawin sila pa. Ako nga, may mga anak, may aso pa nga alagaan kinakaya ko, sila pa. So that's using ourselves as the measure of our students' ability. And this is a sign of ability bias. Using ourselves as the measure also for the parents' ability. Do not ever forget that online distance learning involves now 3 stakeholders, so to speak: the teacher, the student, and the parents. Do not ever forget that parents are already part of already a factor of the formula. You cannot anymore remove the parents from the whole formula of ODL, of online distance learning. You always have to consider the parents. And you might think that that's unfair. They're not the clients. But no, the parents are already our remote learning aids. If your school can afford it, in the lower grades, we have teaching aids, right? We have teacher aids, learning aids. I don't know what you call them in your school, but in our school, we call them learning aids. And basically, the parents are fulfilling the tasks of our remote learning aids. And we have to address them as well. Because they are our extension at home. Because in school, we can we can guide the students ourselves. We can go to their seat and monitor what they're doing on their desk and give them immediate feedback, right? But now, no, we're not beside our students. And who's beside them? The parents, our remote learning aids. Also, our expectations are rooted on this class status bias. Class status as a gauge for students' ability to use technology. Mayaman yan, may piano yan. So I'm sure marunong yan gumamit ng technology. I don't have to teach my students how to use a certain game or a certain tool that we will be using for school. Kaya-kaya na niya yan. Madali namang makita yung end call button or something like that. Madali lang yan. Kiklik lang nila yung link. Or the class status as a gauge for parents' ability to afford technology. Right? Oh, nagka-travel nga yan whatnot. But then again, we cannot judge what the families really can afford these days. We have to really suspend all our judgment. And if there's anything that will really destroy the implicit bias is really that, to suspend our judgment and to really address the problem at hand, the problem that is put forward to you by your students and by your parents. And you just have to trust that that is really their problem at home, and you have to take it as it is without looking surprised, without looking shocked, because the surprise and the shock is a sign of implicit bias, that you're expecting certain things. So how do we battle or conquer implicit bias? One, we have to develop self-awareness. How do we think? Right? What are our, be conscious of our implicit biases. These implicit biases that are at the back of our heads, like nagging us how to think. We have to be aware of those things. And understand the nature of bias. How does bias work? It's basically implicit, basically unconscious. Learn about the different types of biases. There's a website from Harvard regarding implicit biases and cognitive biases. You can also check that. Just Google and you can already see the list of possible implicit biases. There's also age bias, other than gender bias, which is the most obvious one. And dialogue with the dissimilar group. Talk with the families, talk with the parents, talk with the students, and see where your differences are. And do not be shocked if there are differences. Of course, there will be. And here's a reminder from Mr. Bill Ferriter from Twitter. If your students are working from home, you have to rethink your assignments. Students working from home don't have the same support materials as students working in your classroom. They don't have peers to turn to and can't ask you clarifying questions. If there's any bias that Mr. Bill Ferriter is trying to address here, it's the classroom bias. That the classroom is just the same as the environment at home. That if my student can do it in the classroom, why can they not do it at home? It's not the case. And I'm telling you this because I already have first-hand experience. Our students do not have the same environment at home. And that makes doing tasks more difficult. They don't have students to talk to, friends to talk to, or they cannot anymore gauge whether am I really that stressed? Oh, other people are stressed too, so I'm good. They don't have any measure of what is a good level of stress anymore or not a good level of stress. So everything is stressful for them. And that's one thing that we have to start understanding. So 3 basic advice so that we can make ODL more bearable for both of us, for the teachers, or for the 3 of us, the teachers, students, and the parents. Basically, slow down. Next is lesson. And third, transform. And let me give you more details regarding each of the advice. First advice, slow down. Do not be afraid to slow down because you have to understand that connection is greater than the curriculum. Connection first before curriculum. Make sure that you bond first with your students. The mistake that I did in teaching, although I also know about social emotional learning and all these things, but the rush to finish all the competencies and the lessons, because knowing that English used to meet 5 times a week and now we only meet twice a week, I feel like I have to rush things because I only see them twice a week. And one mistake that I committed was not spending time to get to know my students. And it was very difficult to build rapport. It's very difficult to teach a group of people who we just see faces and we don't have any personal connection to. It's like speaking to a wall if you do not build rapport with your students. And if you expect them to recite during class. And we cannot expect them to recite if the rapport is not there, if the students do not feel comfortable with us. And here, know me before you teach me. Bond with your students and let them bond also with each other. They have not seen each other for so long. They don't have any social life during the pandemic. The only people that they would talk to is their family and maybe their close friends. But beyond their close friends, they are not able to make new friends. And this school is really their opportunity to meet new friends and get to know them. And let them get to know you. And it's part of slowing down. Equip your students. You have to teach your students how to use the apps. Do not assume that your students already know how to use the apps because they know how to play games, right? Oh, they play games all day long, Mobile Legends and all that, then they should already be techie. I don't have to teach them how to use the app, how to use Seesaw or Google Classroom. It's so intuitive. They can figure this out, right? Spend time to orient your students regarding how to use your chosen LMS, if it's Google Classroom, Deped Commons, or whatever LMS that you use. Teach how to use also your favorite go-to app or online tool. If it's Flipgrid, Seesaw, or Edpuzzle, Quizlet, Kahoot, you orient them. And teach them also how to use Zoom or Google Meet. Tell them how to use how to leave a meeting, how to join the meeting, how to pause, how to unmute, how to turn on the videos. And help your students familiarize with the buttons on these Google in the video conferencing apps. You can use these lollipop sticks, no, to teach them or to cue them. Hey, unmute session or video off this time, video on please. And then today our app that we will use is Flipgrid, right? Something like that. So you can have these tools also. Part of slowing down. I saw this tweet and I think if we slow down, we'll have time for this. Here's a mom who says, my daughter's second grade teacher held a parent training tonight and it was fantastic. She walked us through the main programs they'll be using, gave us time to bookmark them on our kids' computers, had us interact with Pear Deck slides, and answered all our questions. So something that the parents appreciate is that you give the parents, find time to give the parents orientation regarding the apps. Because again, the parents are our remote learning aids, and they will be the ones assisting their child on how to use the apps, right? Especially for grade school. We have to spend time for these. We have to slow down. So have your mini parent orientation if you can. And all these slowing down is really all part of the social emotional learning, because this is very important in the students, especially during the pandemic when anxiety levels are very, very high. And also our anxiety levels are also very high. And as teachers, we thrive with the presence of the youthfulness of our students. And let's engage in it. Slow down. So just to summarize, take time to get to know each other in this slowing down process. Spend time to familiarize your students with your tools. Spend extra time to teach the parents how to use online tools you'll be using in class if you have time. Second advice is to lesson. So what can we lesson? What do we lesson? We lesson the apps. Use few apps. One app you're already using is definitely your video conferencing tool. So that's already a given during synchronous sessions. And while on synchronous sessions, you'll probably be most likely sharing your slides. So that's already another app. You'll probably be, for those who know how to use Nearpod or Pear Deck, that's already another app. And just add one more app. That's it. Don't use Quizlet and Kahoot at the same time. Or use Quizzes and then Kahoot at the same time. Then Mentimeter and then use Pear Deck or something at the same time. No, just one more app. And use this app for the next sessions until the students become used to it. And like what Monica Burns said recently is tasks before apps. Always consider that it's like what one parent said in our parent orientation, and she said, sana yung mga teachers wag masyadong bibo sa paggamit ng mga apps. True. To be honest, true. We cannot be using or showcasing the apps that we have learned in the webinars too much. And what's important is the task at hand before the apps. If the apps can help enrich the experience, then go for the app. But otherwise, if a pen and paper work activity would suffice, then let it be. Let it be a pen and paper tool. And part of lessoning is this one. Do not give homework. Actually, it's not even lesson homework. Do not give homework. As what Mr. Nicholas Emmanuel said. If students are sitting at home at a computer during virtual learning, why is there homework? same spot, same device, and more work after sitting for 7 hours, something may have to change. And aside from that, they're already at home. And if you give homework, extra work beyond the expected hours for the students already in the day, during the day, it's already very stressful for the students. So just do not give homework. And I rather not give homework as well. And here's another one from Mr. Howie Hua, an educator. He said, to prevent giving out busy work, write down the purpose of that assignment. And if you yourself aren't 100% convinced about that purpose, reconsider assigning it. So something that will help us reflect. Can I do without this homework? Then do without it. Part of lessening is lessening the cognitive load. And what is the cognitive load? Effort done by the working memory, according to Sweller in 1994. And he said that there are basically different cognitive functions in our brain. So you have your intrinsic cognitive load. What is this? This is the ability of the brain to process complex information. And although our brains can process complex information, we can help lessen that cognitive load by simplifying concepts so that the brain functions of our students are not as tiring. They don't feel as tired for the next session or for the next asynchronous activity that they have. So we can simplify. Another cognitive load is the germane cognitive load. This is the action of the brain where it can process new information by integrating it with previous learning, with existing learning. So that's making connections. And this is what we need to maximize. Later, I'll give you an advice regarding this. And then you also have a small part of the brain, which is the extraneous cognitive load. Although this is a very small part of the action of the brain, we can still help lessen this. We can reduce, for example, anything that distracts the brain from learning. So it distracts the working memory from processing new information. So we have to reduce anything that is distracting. Mind blown. So going back now to the advice. So what about intrinsic cognitive load? The advice really is to chunk information. And that advice of using mnemonic devices, very wise. It's something like that. Chunk information, or do not give too much. Yung information overload, that term is real. And sometimes it just sounds awesome, right? Wow, information overload. Wow, this webinar is information overload. And it's not something that we want to do in online distance learning. We have to moderate our information load on our students. So let's chunk information. For germane cognitive load, in order to maximize this, is to have regular reflection that develops metacognition to help move information from the working memory to the long-term memory. And that only happens when there's reflection. So reflection is not just for religion teachers. It should also be for math teachers, science teachers, Filipino teachers, Araling Panlipunan teachers. Extraneous cognitive load, use simple designs and presentations. Do not use anymore too much animation, images, unnecessary images. And do not be afraid to use negative space. If you see that there's a lot of empty space, you don't have to feel obliged to put some images there. You can keep that empty space because that can help lessen the cognitive load, the extraneous cognitive load. So again, when we lesson, make sure that tasks first before the apps. Lesson apps and online tools. Lessen cognitive load. Develop more metacognition opportunities. And keep workload to a minimum. And the last advice, transform. Basically, we need to transform because the classroom move to online distance learning is already a transformation in itself. And the classroom learning is definitely not the same as distance learning, what's happening at home. And because that is different, we really have to start transforming how we teach our students. So in school-based learning, learning happens in school. Distance learning, learning happens in the learners. right? Their own motivation. School-based, scaffolded instruction, you're always there. Whereas in distance learning, it's asynchronous. It's self-paced. And for school-based, immediate feedback. Just go to the student, approach the student, hey, I think you need to work on this and that. Distance learning, intentionally designed feedback systems. It's more effortful, especially on your part, because you have to write an email or write or record yourself and recording yourself giving feedback for the students. School is a consistent setting. In distance learning, setting and the resources may vary. One day, the student is learning at the dining table, the next day, at the kitchen, right? So, setting and resources may vary as well. For school, the schedule is common and very defined. Whereas for distance learning, schedules dependent on family needs. Some schools provide something specific so that to facilitate routine for the students. Student work is visible in school. In distance learning, we have to make it visible. We have to exert that effort to make it visible for us to see whether our students are learning. In school, there are multidimensional interactions. For distance learning, we have to again exert effort to intentionally design check-in systems with our students. And I'm sure you already are familiar with blended learning, and just to wrap this discussion up, or just to summarize these with some keywords. So for asynchronous, the advantages are in pink and the disadvantages are in yellow. The highlighted keywords for asynchronous is that it's flexible, individualized, multiple tools, and share multiple perspectives. It can happen anywhere and at any time. But there are disadvantages for asynchronous. It's challenging. There's no immediate feedback, and lessons have to be more intentional. And understanding of how we learn online is very different from how we learn inside a classroom. So there's a lot of adjustment with regard to asynchronous learning. For synchronous, mostly closely resembles the traditional classroom instruction. You can build relationships in synchronous sessions and develop communication skills. You can also hold small group instruction. It's great for small group instruction. And you can give immediate feedback. And the disadvantages of synchronous and basically of going to school: issues of equity and access, as not all students may have the means to participate in live sessions or the flexibility in their schedule to prepare at a specific time. There's lack of space for reflection. It's rigid and not as individualized. So is asynchronous better than synchronous? No. Not one. No, there's no one method better than the other. So we just really have to take note of the differences of these two learning methods, right? And see that which combo does our school belong to. Is it the 50-50 one? Or is it the more asynchronous, less synchronous? Or more synchronous and less asynchronous? And knowing this kind of combination that our school has chosen for our students, we can try to recall what are the advantages and disadvantages of these learning methods, right? And part of transforming is that we should be able to answer this question: what would you not normally do as a classroom teacher that now you do in online distance learning? If we truly are transforming education for online distance learning, we should have an answer to this question. And here's from Sean Jenkins, and he tweeted the characteristics of an effective remote distance online learning teacher. And looking at all these lists of adjectives, basically this is what we need to start to acquire as an ODL teacher. If before we are very impatient, very impersonal, then now we have to be personal, we have to be open-minded, we have to show empathy and compassion. We cannot anymore ignore our students, because this is something very important for online distance learning, to make it relevant for the students, to make it meaningful for them to attend your synchronous session or to do your asynchronous task. And here's another one, to encourage everyone who are new to using technology. Tech-savvy teachers don't know everything. They just started playing and clicking until they figure it out. Sometimes they Google to figure out how to do things. A lot we reach out to others to test out different ideas. Just start clicking. You can do hard things. And basically, this is also how I started becoming an edtech teacher or advocate. I just really started clicking, no? If you watched Finding Nemo, like Dory would have this song, just keep swimming. So basically that's it, no? Just keep swimming in ODL and just keep clicking, right? Just keep clicking. That's a good principle to live by. And aside from those advice that I gave, I would like to give you a bonus discussion on Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. What? UDL? Is that UBD? Kamag-anak ba yan ng UBD? Understanding by Design? Something like that. But UDL is more of the pedagogy within the Understanding by Design. So you can take UDL actually as on your own without waiting for your school to implement UDL. UBD, the school implements, right? Okay, our school goes UBD. Our lesson plan will be UBD. But UDL is a principle of pedagogy that we can already start doing even without our school telling us UDL tayo, right? So what is this UDL? So basically UDL is also a mindset transforming the idea of traditional learning to something that is more neuroscience based, from fixing kids to fixing curriculum in school. What do you mean by fixing kids? Like fixing kids, oh, this student is not as good, he's failing, let me fix that. So instead of fixing the kid, you fix the curriculum so that the kid can adjust properly to the curriculum. From tasks that are written as write a story to create a narrative. Because if your task is worded as write a story, the only output here is a written work. Whereas, if you change that language, write a story, to create a narrative, the word create can be interpreted in so many ways. I can create a narrative using video. I can create a narrative I can write a story by writing a story. I can create a narrative by producing a comic strip. And I'm already achieving that competency of creating a narrative. Whereas when we just say write a story, we only give the students one way of showing the learning competency, right? From fixing knowledge acquisition to learner expertise. So instead of knowledge acquisition, we are now building learning expertise. And what Duncan said in 2011, education should be tight on goals and loose on means. Tight on the creating a narrative and more loose on how we achieve that goal of creating a narrative. And there are basically 3 principles under UDL. The UDL framework really is a vast, complex framework. But if there's anything that summarizes UDL, it's these 3 principles. Basically, UDL believes in providing multiple means of engagement, representation, and action and expression. So those 3 things. And as I said, UDL is a pedagogy. So in the classroom or in online distance learning, that's what UDL is. Engagement, representation, action, and expression. And the counterpart of that, because UDL is so neuroscience-based, are these things: the affective network, the recognition network, and the strategic network of our brain function. So these are the 3 things that are, or 3 brain functions that the 3 principles of UDL try to maximize. Let's start with engagement, the why of learning. And according to Mayor Rosen Gordon, the one who started the Universal Design for Learning framework, they said that engagement with the learning tasks depends on the provision of a sufficiently flexible curriculum so that each learner can find the right balance of challenge and support. Basically, that's what engagement is, according to Mayor Rosen Gordon, according to the UDL framework, that we are able to challenge and support our students' learning and interests in the topic. Engagement nowadays is only limited to making sure that they are listening and engaging them and having fun. So engagement really also happens when we challenge our students. And this is something that I would like us to explore during online distance learning, to challenge our students more so that we can engage them. And giving them prompts in between our lessons, like question prompts, using Mentimeter, for example, polls and whatnot, poll prompts in between, we can engage our students, challenge them, challenge whether they have learned something from our lesson. So that's one. And representation. This is the what of learning. So what will our students learn? So what is the idea of UDL regarding representation? That we present a concept to the students, not just in one single form. Like if it's a video, then it's just a video. That we have to present the concept in different forms. A video, maybe, an image, an infographic, or even a printed text. Because some students may prefer printed text, really, rather over a video or an image. So, again, according to Mayor Rosen Gordon, for learning environments to support varied learners in all of these recognition processes, 3 broad kinds of options for representation are needed. Options for perception, options for language, mathematical expressions, and symbols. If you're an English teacher, you don't have to do the mathematical expressions, but language in general. And options for comprehension. So give them that option or opportunities to understand, opportunities to perceive, to sense, using their 5 senses, right? What are the 5 senses? Our sight, our smell, if possible, right? Maybe for TLE, if you're cooking, and hearing, and touching, and touch. And let's see if we can try to address these sensory stimulus and stimuli for our students so that we can present to them the concept in different forms. And last, for action and expression, this is the how of learning. How do we know if our students are learning? Basically, this refers to the output. Providing multiple means of action and expression requires that we provide options for executive function. That refers to goal setting, planning, and progress monitoring. Communication, different forms of media. Will they be able to use social media, create a poster on Canva, maybe, or create a video, and give them opportunity also for physical action and movement. So the output should be able to develop these skills in the students, like executive function, communication, and physical action. Basically, that's the idea of UDL, of Universal Design for Learning, and that's my bonus for you. And these are my references. I'll be ready with the discussions in the panel later. Thank you.